And Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. We have Commissioner Port, Commissioner Galka, Commissioner Bracken, Commissioner Prenovo, Vice Chair Robertson. All are present on video. Chairman Salvage and Commissioner McLean are excused.
Okay, thank you. So tonight is a continuation of the public hearings that was initiated last Thursday night, April 30th of this year. At the April 30th meeting, we initiated two public hearings. We went through the first part of the public hearings. The applicants gave their positions, presented their application. We asked questions, and then we continue those meetings tonight. So tonight we will address the public comment section. At the conclusion of the question and answer period, the Planning Commission unanimously voted to continue until tonight, which is what we're doing now. During the public comment period, staff received several written comments and one verbal comment via a phone message. And we'd like to thank those folks for watching the hearing last week and taking the time to comment. We'll be going over those comments tonight. This evening's procedures will be a continuation of that public hearing. Staff will summarize the content and the main points of each public comment. The applicant will then be able to respond to the comments and provide any further statements on the project. The Planning Commission will ask any further questions of the applicant and staff. Once all questions have been asked, the public hearing portion will be closed and the Commission will discuss the merits of the project and ask any final questions of staff. Upon completion of the Planning Commission discussion, a motion for the decision on the application will be heard and considered. Does anybody have any questions of the process for this evening? City Attorney Trey, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think, we read the hearing procedures at the first one, and the notice to this continuation also has a copy of those same procedures. So I think unless somebody had a question regarding the procedures, I think we're ready to proceed. I think that we should announce if there was any ex parte contact since the last meeting. And I assume there's no additional conflict of interest, but any ex parte contact, any of the commissioners should put on the record.
Anybody have anything to disclose? Seeing none, then we will open public hearing. If I can find my note. The Applegate Landing Project, and I'm going to turn it over to Kelly and let Kelly introduce the comments and summarize them.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to start by sharing my screen with you all. Good evening. Before you tonight is that continued public hearing for consideration of the administrative review and Class 2 variance application for the development of a 48-unit affordable housing complex. See if this works for me. Okay. So as a very quick refresher, on the screen is the current proposed site plan. The basic project overview is the project would be accessed from the intersection of Airport and Stoltz Hill via an extension of the Stoltz Hill Road. The development includes the construction of 4 3-story apartment complex buildings and a community room. And the proposed parking ratio is 1.5 spaces per unit, which would be a reduction from the development code standard of 2.25 spaces per unit. So prior to and through the public comment period, the city did receive numerous comments. These comments were provided to the Planning Commission, the applicants, and they were also posted to the city's website and Facebook page on the evening of May 5th. As all parties have had the opportunity to fully read each comment, and the letters that are included, they are fully included as part of the record. I will only be summarizing the main points of each comment that was received. For this project, the city received 5 letters of concern and 12 letters of support, and 1 verbal comment during the comment period. After the close of the comment period, the city did receive one additional verbal comment. And although it was received after the close of the comment period, it would be recommended that we still consider the comment as it was still within the hearing procedures time period, and I would request direction from the vice chair regarding including that comment.
Sorry about that. Does anybody have any objections to including that testimony? Seeing none, we will include it.
Okay. So before I move forward with summarizing the letters, I will be playing for you all the two recordings that we did receive. So the first one that I will be playing is one that we did receive during the regular comment period, and I'll play that for you now.
This is James Burnett at 1755 Strawberry Lane. Have two concerns. One is drainage. There are areas on Strawberry Lane that water stands pretty regularly, and so drainage needs to be worried about. The other one is security and privacy. I feel like there should be at least an 8-foot fence surrounding that property, and there should be a solid fence as with a concrete bottom, like what's on 12th Street in back of Donna Beamer's house at 1770 Strawberry Lane. That's my two concerns. Bye.
Okay. And for the second recording that we received yesterday.
Hello, my name's Rick Townsend. I'm against this planning commission building a complex beside my property. It's been a wetland for years. I've seen ducks. I've seen wild turkeys last year, possum, nutria. I've seen deer come down along the creek and eat cabbage out of my friend's backyard and Ray Brown's house across the street. It's been a wildlife refuge for years. I don't want to disturb the situation.
And that was the conclusion of that one. For summarization, in case anybody had difficulty hearing it, the first call had a concern regarding drainage issues on Strawberry Lane specifically, and requesting a tall privacy fence around the development. And the second call was objecting to the project to keep the property as open space for wildlife preservation. So if there's no issues, moving forward to the written comments, I'm going to go through each letter and simply summarize. I've provided pictures that might be pertinent to provide support for each letter. So the first letter is from Betty Beaver, who has the property on Airport Road, right here where my cursor is located. To summarize her comments, she's concerned regarding traffic on Airport as it's currently congested, and the negative impact that providing a street extension and a traffic signal at Airport and Stoltz Hill would have on her property, and her ability to turn left out of her property to go down into the town area. One of her driveways, the easternmost, is close to the intersection. The western driveway is a bit further away, but she's concerned about the traffic impacting her ability to enter and exit her property. She then echoed concerns that were noted by the Planning Commission regarding parking for the site and encouraged scrutiny of any studies that were presented to validate the reduced parking. She also indicated that she had concerns about her side yard as it'd be located next to the street extension, and how there would be impacts to her for loitering on the sidewalk to provide her privacy. And she also asked whether or not there's been an analysis of potential crime that would occur as part of the project. And finally, wanted to have an understanding of whether the project would impact any of the easements that she holds on the property adjacent to her for her septic systems, which is located up in this area here. So that is a summarization of Betty's letter. Moving on for Anna Klinkabiel's letter. This letter I will actually provide clarification on as I move through it. The reason for this is because her letter is largely asking for clarification of content that was written in the staff report or supporting documents. And so we could provide that clarification as we go along. So for the first point of clarification, it was regarding the duration of access on Strawberry Lane. As part of the traffic analysis, the consultant identified that Strawberry Lane would be accessed until a traffic signal was installed, whereas the conditions in the document for consideration from Lynn County identified that access would only be until the new public right-of-way of Stoltz Hills Extension is built. The standard is issued through Lynn County, as Strawberry Lane is a Lynn County jurisdiction road. They're the ones that are putting the limitation on the access, and so their condition of when the access would be terminated is the standing condition in which Strawberry Lane would be accessed, and that's only until Stoltz Hills Extended Road is built. The next question was regarding vision clearance areas and construction of a site obscuring fence. The commenter was concerned about her fence and vegetation on her property being potentially impacted or requested to be removed. There's a bit of a clarification that we can make for vision clearance areas. These areas are only when it's a direct location of an intersection of a driveway and a street. And the general area is 20 feet along the property line and then 10 feet into the property, and then you finalize the hypotenuse to create that triangle, and anything in that small triangle area is the vision clearance area. The individual's property that we are discussing is this one here, as indicated on the screen. And neither the driveway for the development or the intersection associated with the emergency vehicle access would be within that vision clearance area, so there would be no vegetation on her property or any of her fencing that would be removed, and nothing as part of the development would require the removal of any of her personal property as well. There's also reference to a lot line adjustment in the staff report and the conditions of approval, and she was asking about whether or not this lot line adjustment had any impact to her, because if you look at the diagram, it could appear that a portion of the street would be required to impact onto her property. These dotted lines aren't actual the location of the street. The location of the street would pretty much go right up to property line, but not impede on hers. And so that wouldn't impact her property. The lot line adjustment is simply regarding the fact that the property site as a whole went through a minor land partition for the development in 2019. That adjustment of property lines needs to be readjusted for this project and for the creation of the Stoltz Hill Road. And so that lot line adjustment needs to be filed to finalize the property lines associated with the development prior to issuance of any building permits. And it wouldn't have any impact on her property. Additional comments were requesting clarification of right-of-way permits through the county. These improvements would be associated with modifications to Strawberry Lane to create the access for the emergency vehicle road, and any improvements would only be associated to that intersection of that access point. And the Lynn County would be the jurisdiction to identify the scope of those improvements, but overall there would not be any proposed improvements to Strawberry Lane as a whole. Another question was again asked about clarification of landscaping and vision clearance and removal of vegetation. Again, there wouldn't be no requirement of removal of vegetation for vision clearance purposes for the individual's property. Vegetation and landscaping may be removed and is going to be removed as part of the development property, but the applicant can speak as to how much is being removed versus preserved. And then finally, she requested clarification of the type of direct on-site supportive services that would be provided and whether those services would be limited to residents or if they were bringing in an outside population for the service. And again, the applicant can speak to that. Moving forward, an additional letter from Judy and Stanley Smith was provided. The major concern here again was regarding significant traffic impacts on Airport Road. There was a suggestion of improvements would be to signalize not just Airport and Stoltz, but also Airport and 12th, which identified by the 2 yellow circles on the screen. In addition, it was suggested that the development be accessed from Strawberry Lane rather than directly from Airport. Finally, they commented on parking again and identified concerns that there would not be sufficient parking for guests, especially if the community room is to be rented out for parties or other events that would bring in a large number of guests, and that the project is not in walking distance to town, in their opinion. And so the argument that the site is walkable, they did not feel was a sufficient argument for a reduction of parking. Moving on to Donna Beamer's letter. This letter had a co-signatory of about 30 residents, which was submitted back in September of 2019, before the application was even filed with the city, but we kept the record and included it. This letter again identified serious concerns about increased traffic on airports and indicated an inclusion of a traffic signal would not be sufficient to mitigate traffic or potential hazards on the streets. And it was suggested that while the project is worthwhile, an alternative location in a different area of the city would be more appropriate. And the last letter of concern was from Nancy Charlson. Ms. Charlson lives on 9th Street. The letter requested a privacy fence be developed around the surrounding the property. In addition, she requested that grass areas for each tenant space be provided so that they can have pet care on their own property rather than along the public streets. And lastly, she indicated that the parking variance should not be granted because there's already a parking issue on 9th Street and she's concerned about overflow parking on her street. So that concludes the comments that were received regarding concern over the project. Moving on to the support comments, we received quite a few. The first one is from Dale Jenkins, and there was quite a few signatories on this letter as well. They supported the project because in Lynn County, there is a significant need for more housing. In addition, supportive in the resident services, which would provide a great benefit to the veterans living within the community. Next up, in early of 2019, the Lebanon Chamber of Commerce also issued a letter of support, pretty much echoing the letter that we just discussed, indicating that there is a housing need in the Lynn County as well as in the city of Lebanon, and that the supportive services that would be provided to the veterans on site would be a benefit for the community. Next up, we received 2 letters from Build Lebanon Trails, from Thad Nelson as well as Rodney Snow, and they both wrote letters of support for the project as it would expand the Lebanon Trail system, which it would be along the Burkhart Creek extension. And next up, I consolidated as many as I could on this page. There were 11 other letters from veterans. Several of them, again, had multiple signatories on them, and they were all echoing the same type of support, which is why they've been consolidated on this page. But all of them indicated a significant support for the project, as it would be a project that would support veterans in the community and provide much needed housing. So that concludes the public comments that were issued on the project. and I will turn it back to the chair.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. At this time, then, we will ask the applicant if he wishes to rebut the letters to step in, please.
I appreciate the opportunity to touch base on my project, and if I could, rather than just responding to the letters immediately, if I could give a little background on the project and my relationship with the community, I would sure appreciate that. My name is James Lutz of Applegate Landing. I'm a fourth generation Oregonian, born and raised here in the Willamette Valley. I've lived in Lebanon for over 25 years. I've raised my 3 children through the Lebanon School District and now have 3 grandchildren here in town. 2 of my sons serving in the United States Marine Corps. My family has a long history serving in the military and helping veterans here in the Valley for over a century. Over the years, I've seen an ever-increasing need for veteran services and veterans resources. We have a high percentage of veterans residing in our community. Our community has stepped up in many ways for many years to help and support our veterans, including hosting an all-rare veterans home for our aging veterans. The Edward Allworth Veterans Home, one of our town's pride and joys. Edward Allworth happens to be my grandfather. He was a highly decorated soldier in the United States Army during World War I. He resided in Corvallis since the early 1900s and began helping veterans after the war and began housing and supporting veterans in the OSU Memorial Union after World War II. Starting programs for wounded soldiers, soldiers with PTSD, and much more. His history of helping veterans is what poised the Oregon Veterans Affairs to name our local veterans home after Edward Allworth. I grew up listening to the stories of my grandfather's accomplishments and helping veterans, and having always been drawn to fulfilling his legacy. Seeing the increasing need to help our veterans over the last several decades, seeing my own brother suffer from PTSD and other disabilities due to the multiple deployments, multiple wars, and with my 2 sons serving overseas, I decided to use my construction experience to take the first steps to build a veterans housing project with resident services on site, a private prototype project that would house, train, support the needs of our local veterans. I teamed up with a local nonprofit organization that would provide the needed services, and I provide the facility and complex for our veterans here locally. Crossroads Community here in Lebanon. We came up with a grand plan for our resident services that will be second to none that we have ever seen for a private open campus facility. I then teamed up with another Oregon nonprofit organization, CASA of Oregon, to apply for and chase funding for this prototype project. CASA is a development consultant from Oregon that specializes in housing needs of our in Oregon, and was key to the success of the funding for the project. I invested into the project and spent my life savings to chase this project and the work. We all spent nearly 2 years setting up the project, programs, design, and preparation for the funding application. In 2019, we applied for funding through Oregon Housing Community Services, OHCS. Our prototype project with great on-site resident services proved to the state to be a worthwhile investment. The state of Oregon recognized the need for this project and supported the project in our own hometown. Applegate Landing was awarded tax credits, grants for the project through OHCS. We have spent the last year working with the city of Lebanon through the process of planning and design. With our funding sources, we were required to provide environmental impact studies, wetland delineation studies, archaeological studies, traffic impact studies, drainage studies, geological reports, and much more. With our current ongoing housing crisis in Oregon, we are excited to bring a new development to our city and for our veterans. Affordable housing has a very good impact on local communities, including providing stability for vulnerable families, helping prevent homelessness, increased revenue for local businesses, and so much more. This prototype veterans housing complex is a much needed project in our community and every community in the country. Once the project gets underway, through extensive planning and discussions with the city of Lebanon and Lynn County, we are pleased to finally be able to have a plan to get a traffic signal on Stoltz Hill. Applegate Landing will have invested nearly $150,000 in making this intersection safer and more efficient, adding pedestrian crosswalks and signalization to coordinate traffic and pedestrians through the intersection. With the high school less than 2 blocks away, it will increase the safety of our students that use the existing dirt trails in the area. A few other nice features of the project will be adding to the Lebanon Trail system, which has plans for significant open space and for tenants and neighbors wanting to use the open space near the trail system. The project will have a green building consultant involved throughout the design and construction process. We will be building a high-performance, earth-friendly building using best practices, innovative building technologies to gain efficiencies in design, systems, materials to use to improve energy efficiency and create a superior indoor air quality building, lower water usage, and to utilize natural resources responsibly. The project plans to earn a minimum Earth Advantage rating of silver and is shooting for Earth Advantage Gold. And I do believe that we will achieve gold, Earth Advantage. Within our site drainage system for the development, we will have an on-site storm detention bioswale filtration system to clean and control stormwater to maximum standards. I do understand there's a few neighbors anxious with the new development being built near their backyards. I do appreciate that. We intend to be very good neighbors. We appreciate the opportunity to address the neighbors' concerns and assure them we will strive to be very good neighbors and have a site that will be nicely landscaped and very clean. It seems there is always concern with additional traffic, and I will address that throughout my discussion as well. I'd like to just address, rather than traffic, since traffic was in most of the concerns with the neighbors, I'll address their particular concerns, hopefully all of them, and then just touch on traffic towards the end. I'd like to start with the neighbor at 911 Airport Road, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver. The new road will be close to their east property line for a short segment near the backside of their property. There was concern with noise and privacy. As the new road is a dead-end road, there won't be any through traffic and will have far less traffic than the airport road. It seems reasonable. It does seem reasonable that I could provide additional measures to reduce the effect of having a new road near one's property. My preference would be to refurbish the existing 4-foot tall chain link fence along their east property line. It's a nice fence. It's an old school fence, chain link. They don't make them with that high gauge steel. We could refurbish, put new posts, put new rails, and put side obscuring slats and extend that fence line. I think it's about maybe 100 feet along her property line. That would be my preference. I could put a new fence line in if that's what you would like. I'd like to keep and retain that old fence. The Veterans Housing Project site will be near 500 feet north of Mr. and Mrs. Beaver's house and will not impact their septic easement. Another letter from Anna Klinkable at 1815 Strawberry Lane had concern with the emergency access alley that will connect the new road with Strawberry Lane. This emergency access road was required from the Lebanon Fire Department for emergency vehicle access only. It will have permanent barricades used only for Lebanon first responders. The access will be used temporarily for construction access only for the first portion of construction. This will be gated during construction and not open to the public at any time. Once the new road is open with a target date of November 2020, the construction access will only be used for egress of delivery trucks a few times a week until construction of the facility is complete. No other construction traffic will be allowed to use the access. I placed the new emergency access road deliberately far enough from Anna's southern property line as to minimize the impact of the existing tree line and the landscape area currently there. Both the county access permits and encroachment permits are specifically for emergency access only. My preference is to retain all trees and shrubs and foliage along her property line, our shared property line, and shared mature trees in that location. With regard to the privacy barrier she requests, it would be reasonable to extend the new site obscuring fence on the east side of Anna's property, heading west along her southern property line up to the mature fir trees, leaving the natural buffer along the property line. I believe that those large fir trees are on both sides of the property line, and I definitely would not touch those trees. I think they're beautiful. I think all the shrubbery in that location is mature, as she says, and I would certainly leave all that. There will be no, as Kelly said, there will be no property adjustments for Anna's property there. The question arose in her comments, what would be involved with the HUD 811 household. This is a single unit. It's set aside, targeted specifically for our veterans with serious disabling wounds, most likely a traumatic brain injury occurring during their service to our country. This veteran will have either permanent care or daily care and supervision. As our resident services program will be used to coordinate some of this supervision and stationed out of the community building, the community building use will be limited to the use of Applegate tenants and residents only and not to the public. This will be for our veterans. We appreciate the attention that she took to observe the project and make statements. Our neighbors Judy and Stanley at 970 Airport Road had many great observations and concerns with the intersection on Stoltz Hill and Airport Road. We tried to get approval to use Strawberry Lane for a portion of the permanent access, and there were many reasons it was not approved. Once the new intersection and signals get installed, there will be more consistent flow of traffic onto Airport Road, relieving congestion on Stoltz Hill. There will be no delivery trucks allowed to park on the Airport Road as stated in her comments, because that'll be an intersection with turn lanes. There will be increased vision clearance on all sides of the intersection. There will be signalized crosswalks at all corners of the intersection, as far as I'm understanding, and increasing the safety of pedestrians crossing the road, especially for the students going to and from the high school or to the mini mart. The traffic study we conducted and provided to the city of Lebanon, it was reviewed and approved by the contracted city traffic engineer. The traffic study did a review of several intersections in the direct area, and the study based its finding off a worst case scenario of additional traffic to the surrounding intersection and included a 2.5% increase in traffic citywide. The findings set forth in the study and concluded that the increase in traffic by the entire development still fell within the city's traffic standards and will be until 2022 or later, when the new signaled intersection will be built. And I appreciate the opportunity to address those concerns and questions. I do hope that they will take into consideration what this project brings to our city and our veterans. And I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you, James. Does any of the commissioners have any questions? Anybody at all?
I'd like to make a comment or two.
Go ahead.
First of all, I want to commend Mr. Lutz. I think that's a fantastic project that you're attempting to provide Lebanon and the veterans. I think it's honorable, and it seems like that you have tried to think of everything that would allow that facility to come to fruition. I do have concerns with the parking, though. I think with the property that you have there, I think there's probably some unique things you can do to increase it to meet our development code. But short of that, I think it's a fantastic project that I'd like to support. However, that the parking situation has some concerns for me.
Thank you, Todd. Any other questions or comments?
Hey, I got one.
Go ahead, Samuel.
Hey, Mr. Lutz, like others have said, we appreciate this project here for veterans. I've been in the National Guard this June for 19 years and did Afghanistan 2006, Iraq 2009, and I appreciate you and your family service and what you're doing. So I'm also wanting to be in full support of this project as well. But again, the parking thing, there was a lot of studies that you guys submitted, newer studies, which is great. I appreciate that. I just hope to see that. I believe we had spoke about a possible per unit parking, possibly. Each unit would have a certain amount of parking to mitigate, either the traffic or the parking, because you're reducing the parking. So hopefully that comes about. Can you talk a little bit about that if that's into?
If I may jump in really quick, just to discuss that one aspect really quick. In the staff report, there's a list of suggested conditions for the Planning Commission to consider. And I believe it's condition 1B that was in the staff report that actually requires,
That's right.
I'm just going to read it for you. Says a parking system shall be established and managed by the apartment complex. A restriction on the number of vehicles per residential unit shall be identified and included as part of the lease agreement for each unit. And so I don't know if that addresses some of those concerns that were listed, or if you guys want to modify that, but the intention of that condition is to make sure that anybody that moves into the complex is aware prior to setting foot on it that they have a restriction of the number of vehicles permitted on site.
I think that's something, and I like that.
The concern I have is, although there might be that many, there may not have that many cars in that situation. However, our development code requires 2.25 parking spaces per unit. Unless we want to change that, I don't see why we'd want to make a variance at this point. We have codes for a reason, and whether we want to agree with them or not, it's a code currently today. And to make a precedent now, I think we're putting the cart in front of the horse. If we want to change that code, then we should probably do that before we grant permission to make variances. That's my concern. Sure that the traffic doesn't bother me. Anything else, I think that I really like to see this project go through. It's just I'm having a hard time with parking. I think there's enough property there that some unique things can happen to provide parking. Maybe not directly in front of the units, maybe on the side. I don't know, but we have a development code for a reason, and I'm going to stand fast on that.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Mr. Lutz, what would it look like in the lease agreements? It says that you would limit the number of vehicles per unit. Give us a kind of idea of what that would look like.
So we have a significant number of one-bedroom. We have 18 one-bedroom apartments, and we have 6 studio apartments. What we would do is we would limit those units to a single vehicle. Again, I think we provided enough documentation that the typical folks that will be renting those units out, they won't have capacity. They're 30% and 50% AMI, average medium income tenants, right? And when you include the cost of living and rent, one just can't afford multiple vehicles, and so we would assign and limit the smaller units to a single vehicle if that's what's required. And then again, with we only have 6 3-bedroom apartments in the whole complex, only 6. We would allow 2 vehicles for those, understanding that with a 3-bedroom apartment, we're targeting families, mom and dad, hopefully, or a parent with a couple of teenagers that one of them may have a car. Again, we provided significant documentation this last week, really proving that there will be fewer cars in the future for some of these complexes, and that there really is limited vehicle ownership in affordable housing complexes. Variances are there for a reason. I do appreciate the 2.25% parking spots as a code, but variances are there for just that. It's a variance. There's special occasions, if you will, where we just don't need 2.25% parking spots per unit. With studios and 1-bedrooms, you're gonna have a 1-bedroom apartment. You're not gonna have 2.25% vehicles for that 1-bedroom apartment. We have 18 of them. We have 6 studios, and you're just not gonna have 2 vehicles for those types of units. I could probably go on a little bit. I mean, we've shown that quite a few affordable housing complexes have empty lots. I'm working in Salem right now on some affordable housing complexes, and the parking lots are not full. We have construction parking within the tenants' parking, simply because there's just not a ton of parking in those locations. I do appreciate the question. I do appreciate the concern, but I do feel that our project deserves a variance for parking, simply due to the smaller units, as well as, I know that it's not really a consideration, but we're putting in a nice road that will have 25 to 30 parking spots on the road. And I know that's not a consideration, but we will be investing into the community with additional parking spots on a dead-end road.
Okay, thank you. I noticed, and I appreciate you sending the additional material that we looked at over the week. One of the things that jumped out at me in that additional material, most of the projects that were cited had mass transit available to the project, with the exception, I think, of one. Those tenants that need to get to Corvallis or Albany or wherever, how would that work if they don't have a vehicle?
That's a very good question. I love that. Now we will have Dial-A-Bus, we'll have Lynn Benton Loop, we'll have multiple buses that we will bring to our bus stop that we're providing. School buses will be able to roll into the complex, and we will have multiple buses to the side. Now we'll team up with the Legion. They have a bus sitting around daily. We'll team up with the bus that's at the Veterans Allworth home. We've already had agreements that these buses will come by the complex and take our tenants to town, to doctor's appointments, if they can't get a quick exam at the community building. So we plan to have a good number of multiple entities and buses coming to the complex to take people to town, including the Veterans Zone bus.
I got one. So if that's the case, I think Daniel can talk about memorandums of understanding or MOUs. So do you have MOUs with the Legion already, or is this we plan to get it, or is this already part of your resident services that you already have buses or transportation en route to pick up these older tenants who you claim to be in the studio bedrooms, or the studios, or maybe even the one bedrooms? Is the resident services already set up? Do you already have MOUs, or is this we plan to get it?
Most of this, James, you mind if I jump in on that one? So most of the resident service contracts are running through Crossroads Communities. Their relationships and their MOUs for services extend beyond just this project. So this is the work that they already do.
Okay, so we're just
they
talking
have
about
in place
transportation, only transportation. Is there any resident services for transportation?
So yes, they exist within Crossroads current network of services that they have MOUs for. There are not specifically for Applegate at the moment.
Okay,
With
so
Crossroads
right now,
operating
so right now
services
you
out of the
don't have
site.
MOUs and you don't have anything for traffic for this property right now.
Not signed MOUs. We have confirmation of services for the services that don't require dedicated route stops. So the groups that do like Lebanon Dial-a-Bus, we have confirmation of services that they will serve the site, right? That it's within their service area and that this population is part of their services.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lutz, I think the big question, currently the code requires 2.25 spaces per unit. Your proposal is to reduce that to 1.5 spaces per unit. Given your current configuration, is that maximum that can be fit on the property?
That is near maximum that can be fit on the property that would make this project go. Essentially, the way that we've done some research and we could fit six more parking spots, 6 to 7 more parking spots on the complex. And we would certainly be willing to fit those additional parking spots into the project. With our open space demands and our tenant count demands and our community resources in the community building demands for the project through our funding sources, 6 to 7 parking spots would be the maximum we could add to the project without literally the project failing.
Okay, thank you.
So we can fit a few more in there. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Kelly?
If I may, sir, James has provided some sample, and albeit this is back of the napkin sort of thing, plans of what the extended parking may look like. So if it's okay with James, I could share those images with you all right now.
Sure.
Okay. So what we have, if I get to it. So this plan here shows if they were to maximize and do the 2.25 parking spaces per unit, this is the layout that would have to be created to make that and accommodate that. And as you can see on this area here, this is where the open space was located, and this is where the community room was located. And so if we were to do the 2.25 spaces per unit, they would then need a variance for the open space requirements because they would not be meeting their open space requirements. The only other alternative to that would be to drop the number of units. And if they were to drop the number of units and maintain the community room, they would end up having to reduce the number of units by 16 to be able to meet the parking demand as it currently sits. Now, the alternative that they've provided to try to accommodate more parking while maintaining the community room and the number of units is this plan. And what they would do is they'd extend the parking fields north towards the end of the property. And then they would also be providing more parking over here towards the front of the property. And this would net 7 spaces. And so they would increase their parking count to 1.73 spaces per unit. And that is what is an option that's available if the Planning Commission wanted to consider that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from planning commissioners? All right, seeing none, then we will close the public testimony portion of our hearing. All further discussion will be amongst the planning commissioners and the staff. Okay, planning commissioners, obviously, 2 things have come up. 2 major things, I should say, that has come up: the traffic, additional traffic, and the parking. So how would you like to proceed? Unless you have, is there something else on your mind that is a concern about the project? Or is that pretty well narrow it down?
I just want to mention that one thing I don't want to do is sacrifice any resident services. Guys from CASA in Oregon know about resident services. They deal with resident services all the time. I'm sure Mr. Lutz knows that. So what I don't want to do is sacrifice a community room or any space, for these veterans, because we won't allow a variance. So I am concerned about that. I just want to make sure that citizens have mentioned the parking, and as long as they're utilizing their resident services to get people around to, accommodate, this variance, I think things are sounding good, especially with all the studies, the recent studies you provided. That was good. And the fact you're putting in a traffic light, it's a little late in the game, when that happens, but I think it's good. I don't want to sacrifice any resident services. I just really hope that you utilize everything you can as far as resident services to get these folks around so you do reduce traffic. I think that's everybody's main concern. Because if we're going to do the variance, you're doing everything that you can to use your resident services and your power to say, okay, this is how we're going to get people around and keep parking where it is. That's all I got. But it sounded good so far with the recent material that I've seen.
Okay, thank you, Samuel.
Kelly, can you put up that the 1.73 units per, or I'm sorry, parking spaces per unit plan again?
Yes, sir.
So if I'm doing my math right, you guys can all check me on this. This plan here would give every room potentially a parking space. Is that correct?
All but
So
one.
there's actually 48 units.
Right, but half of those units are only 1 bedroom, correct?
Correct.
So I think if we went with this one, Kelly, did you say all but 1?
Sorry, I don't quote me. I totally missed what you were talking about. Ignore me.
Well, if I'm doing the math right, he said there were 6 units that were 3 bedroom, 24 that are 1 bedroom, and the rest are 2 bedroom, which I think makes up 83 spots per bedroom, correct? Or is it 84?
Hang on. Yes, you'd get at least one parking space per bedroom.
And to me, that seems perfectly reasonable.
I would agree. Does anybody, any of the planning commissioners have concerns about this alternate parking plan? Todd, are you okay with that?
I certainly, I could live with that. I think that's as a move to the right direction for sure. I certainly don't think we're going to hold this project up either. I just think that if we need to look at this code then for the future.
Okay.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Lutz. There's reasons for variances for sure. It just seems like this one's, you know, you're sacrificing 36 spaces. It seems like a very large variance to me. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Samuel, you had some concerns expressed last week. Does that satisfy your concerns?
Yeah, it does. With the new reports they sent, the drawings, and kind of the intro that he just did, everything in my view is satisfied, especially if he's going to look at resident services to move people around as well, which I didn't hear. I'm all for this with the additional parking that we just mentioned.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on the parking, or are we good to move on?
I have one thing to add. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Okay. During my time as we managed an apartment complex, and we always seemed to have problems when it came to parking. It wasn't the residents themselves. So I'm not sure if, offering up a parking spot for every room is necessarily the right thing. Maybe if they could designate the additional parking spaces that are added for visitor parking, because I'm not seeing really anywhere that the visitors can park. I mean, unless they're just going to plan on parking on the road.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Anybody else on that issue?
That was a great point. 6 spots for visitors. I mean, that's something. That's a great point.
Yeah, I like that idea. Okay, moving on then to the traffic. Ron, I got a question for you. In the staff report, it talks about the signal being triggered as early as 2022. What has to happen in order for that to go forward?
So what has to happen in order to trigger the signal, or what has to happen in order for the signal to get built?
Yes.
Yes.
Both of them.
Okay. Well, I think we all know that Airport Road's got some serious traffic on it. So I'll walk you through what we did. We had Applegate submit a traffic impact analysis. And what we would typically do on our traffic impact analysis is have our consultant, the city hires Kittleson and Associates to review our traffic impact analysis. So we had them do that. And we also had them go a step further and do a signal analysis for this development, and knowing full well that when you're adding a fourth leg to an intersection that's already, it's got a lot of traffic to it, it was going to likely trigger it. So, the numbers that you see in the TIA, I mean, I don't see them going down. So it's likely going to trigger in 2022. So you could use that as your number. I think from our standpoint, you've got an applicant that's willing to pay 25% of that one full leg of it, which is great. Lynn County and the city have already entered into verbal negotiations on how to fund the rest of it. It's an SEC eligible project. Lynn County and Lebanon and James will get together. We'll do all the funding for the signal. Basically, it's pretty much funded at this point. Just the logistics. I'll probably have our staff start working with Kittleson to do a design as James is going through that. And we'll shoot to have the thing done close to when he opens. I don't know that we would just wait for some magic moment, Dawn, to say, well, it's 2022, we need to do another analysis. I think we're there now. So I think we would probably put that in to try and wait for 2% more. It'd be one thing if we didn't have the funding available, but we do have the funding available.
Okay, good, thank you. Anything else from the planning commissioners as far as questions or concerns, traffic or whatever? I'm going to ask the commissioners in, do you feel that the criteria has been met for this application, for both the application of the apartments and the variance? Feel free to speak up.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then is anybody prepared to make a motion?
If I
Kelly?
may, very, very quickly, since it does appear that everybody is basing a decision off of the expanded availability of that parking area, planning condition number 1G would need to be modified to say a minimum of 83 parking spaces would be required rather than the current noted 74. Or I think that math is wrong. Sorry, 81 parking spaces rather than the 74 to add those 7 spaces. So any motion should be for a modification with the language to amend condition 1G for the additional 7 parking spaces.
Kelly, that image that you put up a little bit ago, did it say 81 or 83?
I think I put it as 83, but that's because I apparently can't do math. They currently have 74 parking spaces, and 74 plus 7 is not 83. So mind my math.
Okay, so 81. Okay, so anybody prepared to make a motion? Samuel, you want to take care of that?
So I motion to approve the applications AR 20-03 and VAR 20-01, approving the development based on modifications to the findings and the staff report, and approving the recommended conditions with a modification of 81 parking spaces and some of them to include visitor.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the application, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, please say nay. Okay, motion carries unanimously. And thank you, Mr. Lutz. All right, moving on now to our second public hearing that was continued until this evening. We will follow the same process as we followed before. Again, I want to reiterate, or just ask the question, I should say, has there been any additional ex parte contact, conflict of interest that has been established between the time we met last week and tonight? And we are talking about application CU 20-01. Okay, seeing none, then again, I will turn it over to Kelly and she can review the letters that we received.
Thank you, sir. So good evening again. Before you tonight is a continued public hearing for Co-Energy Propane's conditional use permit application for a fuel storage and distribution center. Again, for a very quick refresher, the property would be located north of Rick Franklin's rail yard. The tank would be a 60,000 gallon tank situated in the northwest corner of the leasehold area with access to both the rail line and internal circulation for trucks. And safety measures have been proposed, including bollards, an emergency shutoff, and a fire extinguisher. We received one public comment during the public comment period. The letter is from a neighboring resident. He indicated concern over the fact that the facility does not have any on-site security. In addition, there were concerns about if the tank leaked and how the propane would move through the area and potentially impact his property. And the commenter also included some recommended additional conditions and security measures be placed on the application, including an extra row of bollards around the tank, a leak protection system, including resident notification on the tank placement and if there's any emergency communication if there is a leak, and also more fire protective services. Again, this was the only public comment that was received. And so with that, I will turn it back to Chair Robertson.
Okay, and with that, then we would invite the applicant to step in and address the letter if he so wishes.
Yes, thank you. Again, this is Brian Adams, president of Co-Energy Propane. So we did respond with a written response to Mr. Puma's comments. I'll try to summarize what that response is. Essentially broken down into a couple components. One is the propane leak detection. So one, just to add some clarification of that, the system itself is designed to prevent any leaks. The safety measures have a normally closed position. Any of the piping will detect flow when there shouldn't be flow and will automatically shut itself off. There's also safety measures within the piping that if there is any heat source nearby, it'll actually melt those closures and isolate the propane so it can't leak through the system. In addition to that, there's internal excessive flow safety precautions that are built into this so that if there's excess flow that is going through any of the piping, they'll automatically shut themselves off as well. All of those valves are internal and inside the casings to prevent any potential catastrophic event or any improper use of the system. In addition to that, there is emergency shutoff valves that are equipped within the system that if there is an accidental release of propane during the transfer of products, this mechanism will go into place and automatically shut the system down. We do, even though it's not a regulatory requirement at either the state or the federal level, we will have a monitoring system on this tank. It'll allow us to monitor any time gas is released from the tank. So we can set that parameter however we wish. We do have that capability for modification and justifications. Typically, we set that at a 0.01% or 0.01% of leakage. In this case, that would be 200 gallons. We can bring that down to a lower amount as well. That provides a email alarm notification that's sent out to our employees. Standard configuration and usage for that is just to be able to tell what is the current level of the tank, and then anytime the tank is being filled and anytime the tank is gas is being released, filling up one of the transport trucks that we have, we can easily repurpose that for an alarming system to allow us email notification when propane's coming out of that tank. Regarding the putting the additional bollards in place, we don't necessarily feel like that would be a good placement. The bollards would potentially trap the propane into the facility in the case that you do have an event, you want great ventilation so that propane can evaporate into the air. And having those ballards in place could potentially trap that propane into place. The other thing that I'll note is that the propane is odorized propane, meaning that it has your normal propane smell. Anybody that's used to being, operating their barbecue or being around propane knows that there's an odor to it, so that if there is propane that's leaked, then anybody within the area would be able to smell it. This is not unodored or deodored propane. Let's see. Regarding the fire hydrants and the location, this project has been reviewed with the local fire district. We have been given some general discussions around where the location of the fire hydrants are, what access the fire department are going to have to the site. In general, all those are going to easily meet code. To my understanding and the communication that we've had with the local fire department is that they don't necessarily have concerns at this point. But I would communicate to the committee that this is the first step in the permitting process. We will go through a fire marshal permit where the state fire marshal department and the local fire department will review these in more detail and then provide a permit at the state level that would allow us to place the tanks in the storage facility in place. So there is a full, extensive, detailed permitting process that we would go through if the conditional land permit is provided. We'll go through a permitting process with the state fire marshal that includes the local jurisdiction to ensure that all adequate needs are met from both the state and the local fire marshal perspective. I believe that answers all of the questions that Mr. Puma had put into place. And so with that, I would open it up to the committee if there's any additional questions or responses to my feedback.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Adams? My opinion, he answered the concerns quite adequately and in quite detail. So I'm comfortable with those answers. Any other concerns? Any other questions as far as his application of any kind while we've got him here? Okay, seeing none, then we will close the public testimony portion of our hearing. All further discussion will be amongst commissioners and staff. So again, the question of the commissioners, do you feel that the application has met the criteria that was set forth in the staff report?
I think it does. He's got code, the fire marshals, everybody's already looked at it, and it sounds fairly safe. It's got its own shutoff system. It's got its own monitoring system. He's doing things that federal and state code doesn't even need him to do. So I think he answered the questions well, and his application is looking good.
Okay. Does everybody agree with that? Joshua, I can't see your head nodding. So how are you feeling with this?
I think it sounds great.
Okay, thank you. All right, is anybody prepared then to bring a motion forward?
I move that the Planning Commission approves the conditional use permit CUP-20-01 based on the written findings in the staff report and directs staff to draft a Planning Commission order incorporating the findings and conditions of approval.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Any further discussion? All those in favor then of the application, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
All those not in favor, please say nay. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Brian. All right, moving on in our agenda, commissioner comments. Anybody have anything that they would like to bring forward? Questions, concerns, thoughts? Hearing none, then I believe our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for working through this process. It definitely was different.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Kelly, for setting up.
Yeah.